pull something up really quickly here. Yeah, we're good.
I think we are. I
want to start off by saying, saluting you, Benji Schoendorff, reporting for duty for Unit 2027 Shitposting Division, Psychological Brigades of the Free People of the World. Reporting for duty.
That's right.
Yeah.
Reporting for duty. And my first duty, Comrade Isaac, is to inform you that Riverside is actually a Zionist piece of software.
Very aware. I've been trying to move on. I'm such a procrastinator when it comes to these things. But when I found out, I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I know.
I've been there. I'm sure if you dig deep enough and long enough, whatever, tech on this side of white empire has got to have some links to the Zionist entity. So anyway.
I know. There's only a few degrees, but I am assured that Riverside are liberal Zionists, okay? So
Yes. Yeah, before you kill them, you lecture them about universal human rights.
Exactly. So
that's a big difference.
No, but thank you for reminding me. I have a little list. I'm gonna put that, like, get away from this platform. Although even like Stripe, which I use through Patreon to fund myself, Zionist. So it really is unavoidable. And as a Jew, I apologize on behalf of all my.
My God, yeah, we're already getting into the as a Jews. 3 minutes into the conversation.
I'm going to see some doctor about removing that. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Removing the as a Jew piece of your identity.
Just the whole Jewish thing. Although what I like to tell all the anti-Semites who come, like, leave the worst messages in my DM. I've never heard kike so much in my life as I have the past year. It's crazy. It's also just like a weird slur. I'm just like, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really affect me, but yeah, I'd like to tell these anti-Semites that you are Jewish too, brother. Everyone's a Jew in this world. Everybody's Jewish.
Everybody's chosen. Everybody will get, what is it, 7,000 slaves when the Messiah comes?
More like the alienated part of Jewishness.
Oh, gotcha.
Where we're all unrooted. We're all wandering.
The one that was successfully exterminated by the Nazis and their Zionist minions during Second World War, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, Benji, thank you for jumping on the show to talk about someone who's not Jewish, but it talks about Jews a lot. First, I want to say you have a Substack and a podcast called Resistance is Fertile, which I gotta say, I love that title. So that made me smile. Also, I don't normally do this, but I'm shocked at your age. The way you don't talk online. You talk online like someone like much younger. So I think it's cool. I think it's cool.
Part of it is, I'm 62 years old. Part of it is I'm autistic, so we're always we don't really understand social codes, and we're always trying to. We're basically echolalia machines, right? So like we pick up pieces of lingo in the culture, and then we just have to place them. So that's how I come to this really weird way of expressing myself. Like some of it is highfalutin, obscure Marxist theorizing, and some of it is whatever my son says or memes I come across, and that for some reason my mind thinks this slaps. I need to place this somewhere. So that's how it happens.
You can pull it off. My father could never. How does your son feel about your?
So your father goes around with the skateboard, going, "Greetings, fellow."
Yes,
fellow youth.
Another reference my father would not understand. How does your son feel about you being a poster?
Well, my son is actually part of the Free People of the World. I mean, he hasn't come to the point where he's BDSing Minecraft, but he's been known to, build giant Palestine flags that you can see from the sky and that sort of stuff. And then he gets into those flame wars with folks around the question of genocide, Palestine, Zionism and stuff. And yeah, I can even see it in some of what he says that it's very easy for the culture to make this conflation of Zionists and Jews. Like my current theory, I kind of already shared it, is like the Zionist movement is the vanguard of capitalism in the sense that they've went before anyone else to the ultimate logic of capitalism, which according to Ali Kadri's analysis is to just produce death as a commodity, to kind of, reduce the cost of social reproduction to the point of simply physically eliminating the working class. And if you think about what happened in Eastern Europe around the Second World War, you could plausibly argue that the Jewish community, the Jewish working class, all that used to be known even as the revolutionary Yiddish land, which was very much at the forefront of many, many emancipatory struggles because of their very special kind of petty bourgeois, craftsman, and, skilled working class were largely eliminated in the Nazi Holocaust. And then what you ended up with were a bunch of half-crazed, manifest destiny, intoxicated race pseudoscience lunatics lavishly financed by capital, which was exactly the same as the Nazis, by the way, by international capital. And by this, I don't mean, the international Jewish capital. I mean the actual thing. And and then implanted itself in Palestine, where it immediately imported a bunch of Unter Jews in the shape of Mizrahis that wouldn't actually come. So you had to false flag their country, so they would eventually either be pushed, but mostly jump. And and then you have this great place that I will never name anything other than the Zionist entity, if I can help it, with the most, probably the most Byzantine racial hierarchy this side of, I'm not even sure the Hindu caste system is quite as intricate in its, implicit codes of who's part of the uber chosenite gang and who isn't.
Yeah, I'm constantly at war with anti-Semitism. Sorry,
my dog's anti-Semitic. I'm sorry. I've been trying to impart into him the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, but it's kind of too subtle for dogs.
Well, it seems to be too subtle for most people on the internet too. I think that's the thing that I find most frustrating about this current iteration of anti-Semitism is that it is, in my opinion, an operation to prevent people from gaining class consciousness. I will always ask these anti-Semites, can you please name one other British banking family besides the Rothschilds? And they can't. They literally, no other banking family could possibly come to mind, as though there's only the one that's in control of everything. And so I think that and why I brought you on the show today to talk about Professor Jiang Xueqin. Is that how you pronounce his name? I believe.
Yeah, Xueqin would be. I'm not sure about the tones, but it would be Jiang Xueqin.
So this is also proves how online you are, because you and I have been on the same mission to not necessarily expose him as a fraud, but more like I want to ask why he's appealing to people. But for those of you who don't know the professor, he has been signal boosted all over basically every social media platform. What you'll see is a salt and peppered, middle-aged Chinese man standing in front of a whiteboard with inscrutable squiggles all over it, kind of lo-fi. Like, it's not a high def camera, which I think is also by design. Allegedly speaking in front of students, of explaining. He likes to say it's game theory, political history. His show is called Predictive History, which should immediately tell you this is stupid. Like, I don't know if you can do that. If there's such a thing as predictive history, like it's a science.
Well, Peter Turchin started that, right? I mean, to Jiang's, not to come to his rescue, but he's kind of he traffics in kind of dumbed down Peter Turchin theorizing, and Peter Turchin has decided that you can eventually model the dynamic, complex dynamic system that is history by putting in all sorts of data that actually you don't actually have reliable sources for, and then you're able to predict what's going to happen. But I think that's probably where he gets it, but he does it in a very specific way that I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk.
So when did you first encounter the great professor?
Right. So that's what happened to me. I don't totally want to leave the subject of anti-Semitism, but let's maybe get back to it later, right?
Oh, I mean, it's part of Xiang's whole shtick, so we'll definitely get back into it.
So what happened was the following: is actually some folks that I'm close to in what we have decided to own as the tanky sphere, pushed this content on me like about a year ago or so, or maybe 10 months ago, right? And it was at the time when, this idea came into being that the book of Joshua, I think, like I'm no scholar. I mean, I know very well one very small part of psychology, which I think it's great, but that's my problem. But I'm no scholar of anything else. So I want to be really clear that, sometimes but I think it's called the Book of Joshua, and it's this apparently super genocidal, probably very largely apocryphal part of the Old Testament. And this is where all the Amalek stuff is in, right? And it says you have to, whatever, smite them and their children, their babies, their women, and their donkeys, and their cows, and their chickens, and their little potted plants, and their Tamagotchis, and, whatever, comfort blankets. You have to absolutely destroy all of this. And this idea came around that it had turned into a how-to genocide in Gaza, right? Which isn't totally crazy because, the guy that I will only ever call Milikovsky, part of me hope he isn't dead because I want to see him in the, Alquod's trial. He refers to this a hell of a lot. And, there is a particular brand of completely crazed Uber Zionists, whether they be of self-identifying as Jews or self-identifying as Christian Zionists, who think there is nothing more urgent for the human race in general than to hasten the return of, for one side of the aisle, it's Messiah, for the other one is Jesus. In both cases, it's the alliance of people who expect that the end times will bring the demise of their closest ally, and then some whatever golden age will appear. It's almost like, vulgar Marxism was at the end of the 19th century, but in a completely cookie version, which I actually think is consubstantial to settler colonies. Settler colonies are the ideal capitalistic social formation because you have people who have no real connection to the land, no real connection to each other, no real culture, no real spirituality. It's all cobbled together with a mishmash of, incoherent pieces, and that's how you get this, manifest destiny for the settlers on Turtle Island, this crazy messianic genocidal Zionism for the occupiers of Palestine, and those kind of weird formations. And I think serves capital really well, because capital is about fracking everything that is alive and turning it into this unalive thing that we have agreed to call profit or surplus value, but it's really a process of turning living stuff into dead stuff. And it doesn't just frack nature, it doesn't just rob us of our labor power, as Marx described, but it fracks everything, including every single human experience, right? Like, this is how they come into your dating experience, into your parenting, into all of it, because they're trying to turn all these things that are at the heart of what it is to be human, that creativity, that very special thing for which I have a theory, but I won't bore you with this, into a commodity, into profit, i.e. into dead stuff. So settler colonies are ideal for this. And the more crazy the ideology that you inject in it and that you promote inside of it, then the easier it is to do this kind of crazy stuff, because then people can do the craziest shit, like what, film themselves literally genociding for lulz on TikTok, right? Do you see, I placed the for lulz there. I think I'm hip with the culture, right?
Sure, but I still, to rewind, what does this have to do with Professor Jiang?
Okay, so it has a lot to do with Professor
Okay,
Jiang
yeah,
in
let's
the
tie it
following
in
way.
then. Okay.
So it was around the time where this idea came about that this couldn't be understood in the traditional way of, our Marxist analysis of imperialism and capitalism and Zionism being a part of the empire, being the tail of the dog, if you like, right? And Said Nasrallah was always very clear. The number one enemy, the controller here, is not the Zionist colony. It is the global empire based in the US, right? But then suddenly we started seeing all these weird things, like there are a lot of signs that, is the US really run by US capital, or has it been captured by the settler faction occupying Palestine, right? And that's not completely crazy, because, when Algeria was in the process of decolonizing towards the end, the faction of the settlers, and by the way, a lot of those most genocidal settlers came from working class backgrounds, ex-communist voting sectors of the settler population in Algeria, tried to coup the whole of France and to take control over the whole of France. So, it's not totally crazy. If you take out the Jewish side of it, the fact that the settlers in Palestine were, frankly, more threatened than those on Turtle Island, would try to ensure their security by taking over the mothership, if you like. So that's when it all started. And then people started saying, yeah, but those guys aren't playing by normal rational rules. They're playing by this Book of Joshua stuff. And that was kind of around the time that Xiang was putting out a series about the history of religion. Like, I'm no history of religion scholar, but my spidey senses as I was listening to this stuff kind of started tingling, like, that's a really weird way of presenting Islam.
The problem, though, is it's too simple and clear. Say that modernity began in Europe. We forget that Islam really built the basis for modernity. Okay? It made us feel as though we could influence the world. That's the power of paganism. But Islam is doing the same thing by making God concrete. Okay? You can feel God. God is everywhere. He knows everything. But what Islam is also doing is he's seeing the simplicity, clarity, and absoluteness of monotheism. Okay? Monotheism is nice because with monotheism, everything becomes clear to you. Right? Okay, there's one God, therefore I just have to follow him. I just have to believe in him. There's like a million gods in paganism. And so it's unclear what you should do or how you should relate to this million gods. But here in monotheism, the relationship between God and you, it's very, very clear. Okay? So in other words, Islam is a major intellectual revolution.
I forget the details, but there was this really weird way of presenting stuff, which was, you could just feel it was a mishmash of stuff he had, I'm not even sure, read in books or maybe got out of, AI summaries or whatever. And then weird psychological projections. And so, the Muslims did this, but they wanted to do that, but it was actually some kind of a more advanced form of Judaism or whatever, And sorry about that. And I went, oh God, I sort of understand it, because people don't understand what's going on. And when you don't understand with your current toolbox of analysis, you look for something else. And this guy came along. But it was kind of, oh, come on, I would need to study a lot about ancient religion before I could even say this was right, wrong, or, which I now believe, not even wrong, right? And then one day I watched a video of his, and he talked about China, which is a subject, I'm studying as deeply as I'm able to at the moment, socialism with Chinese characteristics. And he said, well, China is all built on corruption. It's always been built on corruption since 5,000 years. And all the urban development you see in China is based on the deep corruption of the Chinese elite. And basically, they're just high-rise versions of your Potemkin villages, right? And I thought, what in the holy whatever is this nonsense? And at that moment, I went, this is just I don't know what this guy is about, but he's a cook. And I told my friend said, yeah, but China is not doing enough at the UNSC or whatever. Okay, fine. And I dropped it there. And then the guy kept on coming back, and especially what got my goat was starting to see him appear on supposed anti-imperialist content creators, right? And so one day on Substack, this guy called The Political Economist put out a piece where he said, oh, he's stolen my stuff and it could be a CIA op. And then I just reposted it by saying, Daddy, what does a psyop look like? And then all hell broke loose. The rest is history. Then I kind of, part of my flag, a very small part of it, got nailed to the anti-Jiang mast.
Yeah, I made a joke saying that he was the new Jordan Peterson with Chinese characteristics. To which you said that he has Alexander Dugin characteristics, which is also just like, yeah, another one of those bizarre pseudo intellectual frauds that people glom onto for some reason or another. I remember when I first saw Jiang, yeah, I got the spidey senses right away. I was like, there's something weird about this. In general, when people make these grand statements, when they say the Muslims are this, the Jews did that, it's just to treat any sort of moment in history monolithically is not academic. And I hate academia. Like I like Professor Jiang, I'm doing air quotes for the listeners, Professor Jiang, have a BA from a liberal arts college. That's I am as qualified as Professor Jiang is in the credential world.
Only if you went to Yale, Brother Isaac. Did you go to Yale?
I went to Reed College.
So there you go. Yale is a special kind of qualification, as our listeners
CIA
who are
center,
students, students of the deep state might.
That is true. So I am not qualified to run a psychological operation. However, I am qualified to do massive amounts of psychedelics and run around naked. I did learn to do that at Reed College. But I feel like Jiang is the product of a deeply anti-intellectual period of time that we are entering. Again, I do not like American higher education systems. They are completely corrupt. They're broken. they're a waste of fucking money. If anyone's listening is considering dropping $50K a year to get an undergrad degree, don't do it. Like literally, you could do anything.
Go to China. China. It's free. They will give you money to be there, and you learn real stuff.
But I think that there is, what we are seeing though is with the collapse of these institutions, of these higher learning institutions, you see people like Xiang enter the fray and capture people's attention and craving for knowledge, craving for like I don't begrudge people for wanting to know what's going on, and this is what's presented to them. And my advice to everybody is, whatever is shown to you without you looking, you have to look for things. You have to find them yourself. Don't let things find you, because anytime something pops up in your feed and you start seeing it, you should immediately be skeptical of this stuff.
So there's the guy who said, I was putting that point. I said, anybody who's algorithmically pushed in this day and age where it is clear they've told you all their algorithms are controlled by literal CIA, Mossad operatives, right? Ex-operatives, if you believe in that particular story. So anyone who's pushed to your thing, and the guy is pushed to an extent, like, I think I have clicked do not recommend this channel on every single one of his 20,000 channels. And yet the stuff still gets pushed to me when I'm not signed on to YouTube. This stuff gets pushed onto me, right? Mm-hmm. I'm told it's the same. I'm just, I use YouTube for watching content, and I'm on Twitter, but I'm told it's the same on Instagram, on Facebook, if it still exists.
Yeah, he's everywhere.
Everywhere. And that, that means something which hopefully we're going to be able to get into. But you said something about the American education system. And as it happens, I'm kind of putting the finishing touches to a Substack article kind of about that. And as you know, I'm sure the American education system has turned into something that is very deliberate and very specific, like what do we call it? The wind, the inspiration of Red October was to elevate literally the world's population to the highest level of existing human knowledge, right? So you see in the Soviet Union, rates of literacy going from like maybe 5% to 95% by the beginning of the Second World War. You see the same thing, and it's not just communism, right? You see the same thing in Iran, where you had maybe 2% of women literate before the 1979 revolution, and today it's 97%, with the highest rates of engineering PhDs from women. 60% of the engineers that developed these incredible missiles that nobody else in the world has at the moment, and some of whom we haven't yet seen come out, are women. I know. How's that for feminism? Exactly. And in China, the same. Like you are at a place in China today where the new generations are literally 100% literate. And look, I'm learning Mandarin at the moment. Let me tell you, that particular written language is one of the hardest to get literate in, simply because, just to kind of be able to read most stuff, you already need to know 3,200 basic signs. And apparently nobody knows exactly how many of them there are, but it goes into the hundreds of thousands. So that's been the general movement of progress of humanity. And it has been in the US also. My theory, and it's borne by facts, and it's borne by, the documents you can see now of how the ruling class was thinking. They've been, getting onto the train of public education, public health, higher wages, this, turning from, was it terrorism into Fordism, Keynesianism, the New Deal, but it was really a temporary compromise, and they absolutely hated to have to give anything out to the subhumans that are the plebs, because there is this very, very deeply racist ideology. I mean, it comes from Western Europe, but it's, it's like this kind of wanting to project some biological inferiority on the people you exploit, on the people the lands of whom you invade, rape, frack, and all the rest of it.
Yeah. The IQ, the Somalian IQ.
Yeah.
Is
The
XYZ.
IQs,
Yeah,
yes,
that
of course.
bullshit. Yeah.
And what they have done deliberately, I think, since the 60s, is found a way to de-evolve, is an insult maybe to evolution, but to turn the US population into as close to a bunch of babbling idiots as you can socially engineer, right? So you have now 54% of US adults who cannot read beyond grade 6 reading skills, and brothers and sisters, we're talking US grade 6 reading skills, which is kind of grade 4 in most countries. When I was 14, my parents were on this exchange program. We had a USian come to our house for school year, and I went to Bellingham, Washington for a school year. And I ended up in high school of my age, right? And literally what these people were doing in high school, I had been doing 2 years previously, right? Absolutely everything. So for the reading skills of a non-USian, 8-year-old. So think about the critical thinking skills that go with that, right? I don't really remember my spending a lot of time trying to work out the finer points of Hegel's phenomenology of spirits and the potential logical fallacies therein when I was 8 years old, right? And so you have this population that's already pretty
fucking stupid.
Yeah, but I hate to blame people because it's not.
It's I don't blame them inherently. I mean, it is by design.
It's by design.
Yes.
Whereas it was by accidental unfolding of feudalism or whatever in the past, but now this is the first time they do it by design. And then you have the higher education in the US, and it's less the case now, but in France, there was this idea of universal education, and you had to kind of get what they call general culture. Like you couldn't do a high school degree without doing an exam in philosophy, for example, right? You had to do history, geography, philosophy, chemistry, physics, math, literature. Like the idea was to give people to have a democracy. You needed people who had a
right.
pretty good understanding of
a classical liberal education is what
right.
it was. Yeah.
But one thing that's been very striking to me interacting with US colleagues, including folks that intellects are clearly towering. Sometimes you meet people and you immediately perceive how smart they are, like, and I love it. It's like, for me, it's a source of wonder. Oh my God, one of those really smart people. But it's almost like, and I think it was actually, again, theorized by them, because in the 60s, with the civil rights movement, with the students getting really involved in that, they got really worried that the student population could actually suss out what the hell was going on and go all Trump on them. We're going to shut everything down until we find out what the hell is going on. And what they did, I think, as a response to that, is they turned every smart US person into some kind of an idiot savant, So like, people know so much about this very narrow field, And then for everything else, they rely on CNN and the New York Times or Washington Post, just to have a bit of...
I think you're right that that's what the emphasis on STEM education has done to people. And I get the idea of like the efficiency of specialization. But yeah, Americans are certainly lacking in a classical sense, an actual education. But I also think that what we have in America, obviously, like our institutions are banks now. I mean, the amount of times you hear about Harvard's endowment and
hedge
how
funds,
much,
hedge funds.
Yeah, it's a hedge fund. That's what they are now, and that's what they're. That's what the board does at a college. That's what the president is there for, is to ensure not that you are getting educated. Because at Reed College, it used to be, I think, one of the most difficult schools in the country. We had that classical liberal education. I think we had like a dropout rate of close to 50% at one point, just because it was so difficult. But by the time I got there, like,
yeah, also because the drugs were...
Yeah, the drugs are pure. They weren't cut with the crap now. The Zionists, once the Zionists got their hands on Molly, it was over for all of us. But I also see, so higher education's a joke now. It really is just a ticket to ride for people who can afford it. It's a purchase credential,
and it's a
one.
ticket to debt slavery for those who can't afford it. Like if you have, if you're burdened with debt, you might think twice about world revolution.
And then one thing I have noticed amongst peers of mine who did not attend college is a sense of bitterness and insecurity that they are not as good as those who have a degree, even though I don't think I've ever asked anybody, do you have a college degree? I don't know what my GPA was.
And from which, and is it from an Ivy League school?
Yeah, I would never dare ask someone what their GPA was. But I have noticed amongst people, especially growing up here in Florida, who didn't go to school, a deep insecurity. And so I think that people like Professor Jiang really, really appeal to those people, because I think that he is doing this like sort of rebellious academia, because it's he's like, no, this is the real truth, not the stuff.
This is the inside baseball. I'm going to show you the inside baseball of academia.
And so I think Americans are super susceptible to that, because Americans are deeply insecure, because I think deep down we all know we're fucking stupid. Like, we're pretty dumb people. And so I think that having that secret knowledge, when someone who's credentialed, someone who went to school, is talking about something like, well, I know actually the truth, and you wasted your money and time, which they did, going to college. So I think there's that element of it as well that appeals to people.
Yeah, and you said concentration on STEM. I don't actually think that is the root of the problem. It's the way it's done. Like, even if you're concentrating on psychology, or even if you're concentrating on literature, on history, or whatever, is the fact that you do not have the broad range. So you may be really good at applying critical skills, advancing knowledge in that little narrow lane. But the moment you look outside the lane, it's CNN and New York Times, which means, by the way, and studies, suggest this, that the most gullible to imperial propaganda these days aren't the dumbed down plebs, if you like, but they're actually the PMC. They're actually those people with college degrees who know their stuff in that one little narrow field of study, or sometimes a professional endeavor if they've stayed in the same field. But for the rest of it, just, buy whatever is on the label and think that's what's on the tin. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, as you said, they know they've been swindled out of something. They know the American dream, if it ever existed, if it ever there was anything other than something you had to be asleep to believe in, is not for them. They're shut off out of it forever. So there is this almost kind of reflexive skepticism about all official discourse, right? Which opens the door to, well, pre-revolutionary intellectual situation in the sense that people go, okay, we're being lied to, but also because your critical faculties maybe haven't been developed as much as they might have been, to all sorts of morbid symptoms, let's say, these kind of things that appear when the old is kind of collapsing, but the new isn't yet appearing, and in that place.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that the professional managerial class, especially anyone who got a degree in political sciences, watching them do their realpolitik about like basically legitimizing human sacrifice, just saying that this is how the world works actually, and never considering that it doesn't have to be this way. So I know exactly what you mean by the educated class as well, and how dumb they can be too.
I actually realized the empire was not long for the world when I read, kind of by chance, but not entirely, in 2017, Andrei Martyanov's Losing Military Supremacy. So Martyanov is the next naval officer of the then collapsing Soviet Union, who really knows his military stuff. He's been to serious military academies, which apparently USians don't go to anymore. They go to West Point, which is some kind of a dating scheme or something. And he just let it all out, including all the math equations that I wasn't able to suss out. And so now he's become kind of a talking head who, bless his soul, repeats himself nearly every day. And there's always a point in his podcast appearances where he goes to, the problem is you can't show morons that they're morons because they're morons. It's impossible.
It's like a Zen koan, What's the sound of one hand clapping?
They're all morons with degrees from diploma mills called the Ivy League, and they're absolute morons.
And I also don't blame people for falling for someone like Xiang, because I'm guilty of it with certain characters as well. I don't know if you know Dr. Roy Casagrande. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
So I found him on my feed. He started showing up, and it was like, oh, this is interesting history. I'll indulge in this. And I politically, I liked what he was saying. It validated what I wanted to be true. I sussed him out when first I was like, assistant professor at Austin Community College. I was like, well, Isaac, don't be a snob. That's silly. But then when I saw him take now he lives in Dubai and he's giving these lectures in front of these Emiratis, and I'm just like, oh, and he's just flattering them. He's just like saying how great the Emirates are, how great the Gulf nations are. And I was just like, oh, fuck, dude.
Isaac, let me just tell you what it is. Let me just tell you what it is, because I've been informed of that by, discussing Professor Jiang's case online. What it is, Isaac, is you're jealous. You're just jealous because you don't get the clicks, because you don't get invited to those places. This is what it is. And you just haven't done the work, and because you're just not as good as those guys.
That's I'm really bummed that I never got invited to Little St. James. I wasn't interesting enough. So yeah.
So yeah, and I did this. I did this conversation with Jeff Rich, who has a great channel called The Burning Archives. So he's a history PhD who then spent 30 years as a bureaucrat in Australia and took early retirement a couple of years ago and started this great channel. And he's like an historian's historian, although he's not a published historian, but he loves the field. He loves the questions. He loves the methodology. He has lots of great content. And when I first, waded into the public discourse about Jiang, I looked on YouTube if there was anybody saying anything critical about the guy, right? Which is almost no one. I mean, some people are even telling you that you can become rich at crypto with Jiang's whatever. And I found a video by Jeff Rich, who that was super detailed. You know, he really made the good point. So we had a conversation yesterday, which is on a Substack now, and there's many dimensions. And the first time I heard he gives off Jordan Peterson-y vibes was from Jeff. You see, and I must say, I was totally hermetic to the Jordan Peterson phenomenon because I'm a psychologist. So like, I could listen 30 seconds to the guy and says that he was just full of absolute shit, you know, in the field that he's supposed to be trained in. So that's enough for me. And Jiang is in many ways, I think, the Jordan Peterson of the age. But, you know, as came to me when I was discussing with Jeff, Jordan Peterson was kind of your self-help guru for your incel generation. But Jiang is very different. Jiang is your geopolitical collapse of the empire that everybody feels but nobody totally understands. Maybe end times, maybe transition to something else. Jordan Peterson. So if you know what I mean, he's not giving you life advice. He's not telling you those are the rules, the blah, blah. He's just saying, this is the inside baseball. This is where it's going. And in times of confusion, of uncertainty, where even the best analysts, people who have spent 40 years studying the thing, you know, hesitate to say where it's going. It could go that way and maybe that way and possibly that way and possibly in a way that nobody can tell because there's such a kind of, you know, perfect storm of factors happening at the same time. Here comes a guy lecturing, we don't know where, in front of, we don't know how many
He's
people.
Canadian. He's a Canadian citizen, which is also immediately disqualifying for me. Anyone who's Canadian, I will not. Anyway. I know. But I think you're absolutely right about the conditions in which they've arisen are different. Peterson's, you're right, was incel. So the enemy was women, was cultural Marxism. And what the Xiang is presenting, I think he is doing these anti-Semitic coding that is appealing to everyone right now, because honestly, that's the new Bitcoin right now, is anti-Semitism.
But to be fair, to be fair, comrade, maybe you're doing this mistaken of centering your understandable Jewish feelings, because I think Jiang's anti-Semitism is just, you know, as profound or serious as all his other nonsense. Like, it's not, I'm not sure it's the core message of him, but we can get back to it. But
I think you're right. It's not the core message, but I think it's people's entrance into it, much like with Jordan Peterson, people's entrance into him.
No. I beg to disagree. I think people's entrances to Jiang is this bullshit about predictive history, because, as I say, the time, you know, everybody can feel it's wobbling on its axis, right? Everybody can feel this hyper power that can impose its will just by, you know, speaking softly but carrying a big stick. Everybody feels the stick is shrinking so fast that it needs to speak ever more loudly. And, well, you know, talk doesn't carry that much, doesn't stop missiles, let's put it that way, right? And so people feel the moment is super uncertain. And here comes this little guy who has the quality of both, you know, being presented to you as structurally humble, like little high school prof from this faraway land that we know nothing about, who does this lo-fi, all styly writing on the blackboard, but it's not a blackboard, it's a very advanced, you know, computer screen or whatever. And just telling you where it's going. So you have a place in the world where suddenly all that confusion is turned into something that is clear, that becomes logical again, that becomes absolutely, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. And by the way, did you know that I predicted Donald Trump's election and the American empire going after Iran? You didn't know that, right? I'm telling you now.
Yeah. I mean, when I say, and I know we want to talk more about anti-Semitism and its functions, I think that Jiang is a Zionist, personally. I think he's serving Zionist masters.
Well, you can't be a Zionist if you're not anti-Semitic, right? That's kind of first qualification for the job.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean all anti-Semites are Zionists, of course, but all Zionists are anti-Semites.
Yes, absolutely. And so, yeah, I guess I'm just seeing people hungry for this right now, and people are hungry for at least putting some sort of face on an enemy. And not that he's as explicit as like Nick Fuentes is, who's also a Zionist. But I do see them riding this wave right now. I mean, I growing up in like whatever, like however Jewish I really am, because I'm not halakhically Jewish. So a lot of people, I'm not actually.
Well, you're in the only state in the U.S. that's actually a Zionist occupied, right? Being Florida.
Yeah,
sorry,
that's
you even have a Milikovsky overseeing the whole state from his balcony.
Ron DeSantis' relationship with the state of Israel is fucking crazy, and he probably got those connections when he was torturing people at Guantanamo. So yeah, it's all there. Yeah, Florida is the future. I keep telling everybody that if you want to know what the rest of the United States is going to look like, it's going to look like Florida, where
including alligator Alcatraz, right?
God, I actually just drove past that yesterday. But yeah, in Florida, this is what you can look forward to in the rest of the country. They are literally going to start paving our streets with radioactive waste. That's that bill passed. You will be driving over. First, we drove over Indian burial grounds, because what we did in Florida was we had these shell mounds all along the coast, which were like Indian burial mounds, Indian shell middens. They took that, ground it up, and made US 41 with it. So you're literally every day you're driving on Indian burial grounds up and down. Now it's going to be radioactive. So it's like maybe it's their revenge somehow. I'm not sure, but that's beside the point.
But that, if I may interject,
Please.
I've come to a decision on this dog tail conversation. For a long time, I've been saying, the law of physics apply, and the tail is never going to wag your dog. So forget it. It's U.S. imperialism. It's not the Zogs or whatever. Whatever theory that says that those who occupy Palestine actually hold the reins of the empire. But I think it's a kind of a human centipede situation, right? That's what we have today. And brothers and sisters, once you get the horrible image out of your head, or maybe once you can't get it out of your head, it's a source of hope for humanity and the future of life on the planet. Because if you get rid of any section of that particularly noxious death dealing human centipede, the rest of it dies as well. So I'm increasingly of the view that as the Zionist colony collapses, which clearly won't be long, due to the extremely able and long-planned counteroffensive by our brothers and sisters of the Axis of Resistance, we may come to the point where that's even worse racist, genocidal settler colonies in North America also go the way of the dodo. So I hope and pray this is what's going on, and the human centipede analysis is correct.
Well, I hope so as well. I think that's an optimistic interpretation, which I always want. I always want hope. Yeah, I do see this a lot, and I tend to. I think it's too simple sometimes just to say that Israel has complete and total control over the United States government and its finances. So
it's not complete,
no,
but it's pretty effective.
There's a lot of influence there, but to me, I just see it as a continuum. You know, I don't. It's an unbroken continuum of settler colonialism, and this is the direction it's heading in right now. And whether through sheer incompetence or some total brilliance that we can't see, that things are moving beneath the surface. I think there's an interesting theory that the United States is purposefully collapsing the petrodollar to replace it with cryptocurrency in the United States. There's something there.
Everything, that is not my view at all. I'm kind of, when you look at the arc of like the civilizational arc, if you can call it that, remember always Gandhi being asked about Western civilization, what he thought of it, and his response was, well, I think of Western civilization, I think it would be a really good idea. And, but the arc is that as it loses, look, it's an accident. It's a 500-year-old accident due to this quirk of monopolizing high tech, basically, monopolizing scientific knowledge, which itself, came from all over. Algorithms were invented by a Persian mathematician, right? The zero was also invented by a Persian mathematician, so that 300 years later, we would be able to measure the IQ of the Iranian monarchist diaspora, right? And for a while, those Western European, as they invaded the rest of the world, that technological monopoly, right? And they mistook that accident a proof of their brilliance. It's exactly like CEOs, CEOs who succeed. Proper study shows that it's at least 50% random that you'll succeed. But every one of them is going to write you a book that says, these are the real reasons, objective reasons why I succeeded, just follow them.
This is why I need to live forever and spread my seed amongst the universe.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And eventually you get to the point where you become absolutely unable to conceive of the fact that brown people, as they call them, yellow people, whatever, these, weird kind of shades of degrading shades of the pure whiteness, they just don't have what it takes. So like, you look at the discourse on China, everybody still says, and my son's geography teacher 3 weeks ago said, they got to that level because they stole everything from us.
And that's what Xiang says. That's exactly what Xiang says. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have this thing which at the end of the day stops you from Sun Tzuing your enemies, right? Because you project their inferiority, you smoke your own farts, get high on your own narcissistic supply, that, you're the best ever. So you don't even need to study. I mean, those guys, apparently, they asked an AI to churn out a target bank, 5,000 targets for their operation. And they haven't even stopped to look at the research on AI, which shows this is a really bad idea. If you ask the AI, can we win? It will say yes. You ask 5 minutes later, it will say no.
I mean, that is kind of funny that it, the same way a lot of these OpenAI, ChatGPT chatbots are convincing people to kill themselves. Is that just what they did to the United States? The United States just commit suicide through ChatGPT? I mean, it's funny, but it's also terrifying because it's likely that that school in Iran, that girls' school, was targeted through AI, and that's what it told them to do. But don't worry, don't worry.
My comrades say, never let the bastards deflect responsibility onto their technology. At the end of the day, it's on them. it's on them. It's on Trump. It's on Excel. You killed 174 girls as probably a child sacrifice to your Epstein master. Was that anti-Semitic, brother?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
I'm actually, I debate the Jewishness of Jeffrey Epstein. I will say, when I was in Israel, I visited Israel. Never in my life did I feel less Jewish. I was like, this is not a Jewish country.
I have to say, look, I have a confession to make. I've already said it, but I actually, for a while, was into psychedelic trance for my sins. And so I ended up being invited to a rave party in
outside of a
occupied
concentration camp?
Palestine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, it wasn't. It was 10 kilometers south. It was people based in Haifa, 10 kilometers south or 5, I'm not sure, of the Lebanese border, right? And I don't think I've ever been in a place where the racism was so thick you couldn't cut it with a knife. It was so baked in, so natural, so unseen, so in everything that it just blew my little mind. And I apologize to have crossed the BDS lines. I blame the drugs. I won't do it again. And yeah, it was amazing. And also, the other thing that was really weird is when I was into the psychedelic trance, I also went to India and to Goa. And I have to say, those, folks from the Zionist entity were just next level obnoxious.
I lived in Dharamsala in Himachal Pradesh for about a year.
So you know what
and
I'm
on
talking
the
about.
other side of the mountain was Dharmkot, where all the Israelis were, and they were fucking assholes. I mean, I remember like walking around with a couple Israelis, and there was a chicken vendor just selling like, sauteed cubes of chicken for just a handful of rupees, nothing. And the Israeli kept saying, let me get a sample. Let me get a sample. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like, you really, this costs you pennies and you're going to ask for a sample first? Or like,
yeah, but it's the whole concept of being a frayer, no? Like,
yeah,
you
the
have
frayer,
to,
yeah.
the frayer is what you have to be. Otherwise, you're just an idiot.
Yes. The
Freeloader.
annihilating logic of being a sucker, making sure everyone else is a sucker so that you're not, because if you're not fucking over someone, that means you're being fucked over. That's a great mentality.
But the funny thing is, and this guy Ori Goldberg, describes it, and is still a settler for some weird reason. Describes it as solipsism, right? A solipsistic society in which there is only you. And to me, this is like it's almost like if you put Western civilization in a petri dish to get the most chemically pure form of it, and you get this. I mean, there's the cod, the cod Jewishness around it and stuff, but at the heart of it is there is only me in the whole world. Nothing, no one else exists. And so therefore it's Nietzschean actually, if anything, my will is the law of the land. My might is my right and everything. And they're all a bunch of babies, who need to wear adult diapers whenever they meet anybody who's determined to live on their land.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right in that Israel can't exist. Not that it doesn't have a right to, right? Whatever that means.
No state has a right to exist.
Right.
I mean, if you start to give human rights to your states, you're already depriving humans of human rights. What are you talking about?
Corporations, however, do have rights.
And that's and by the way, that's how it all started, like that's how capital becomes this kind of my co-host Indica is really good on this. It becomes this kind of artificial intelligence that takes the place of the living, because now corporations are living beings with human rights. And so you can't go against them. But of course, they're not living beings. They have no human rights, and their only goal is to exploit you. So at the end of the day, you'll have only corporations and no humans left, if we let them.
But let's hope that this self-annihilating principle of Israeli culture and society, like you said, uncut Westernism, is will be out on within not just our lifetimes, but within my dog's lifetime. You know,
I think so. I think so.
think...
Someone said, I think it was on our show last week, like we do this series on Iran, next one, 8 p.m. tonight. Like the Iranians are able to cut off the internet for everybody, but the Zionist entity can't. And, and it came to me that if you cut off their internet, most of them would just swim to Cyprus just to log on to Instagram, right? I mean, if you cut off my internet, like I'm not, I'll own up to my own whiteness. If you cut my internet, no, please, anything. Don't do that to me. I'll leave now if you...
Yeah, you won't know how to change a tire. You can't YouTube tutorial it.
Yeah, I can't make dinner. I can't be a revolutionary Marxist anymore if you cut off my internet. Come on, guys. The future of world revolution depends. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The web is... Nasrallah used to say, quoting a verse of the Quran, that it's weaker than a spider's web. And the interwebs is a very weak part of that web.
Well, their targeting of data centers is like, it's so fucking cool, dude. It's so cool. Benji, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out this show?
I want to add something about anti-Semitism. I wrote a long article about it on our Substack. I think at the moment it's complete nonsense, right? I think I think the fight against anti-Semitism at the moment only serves the Zionists, but I want to be very clear what I mean by that. We need to be very clear-eyed about what the project of people who are more dangerous than Xiang, being Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and that thing that basically, to my eyes, CIA Team B. If it all goes tits up, we'll just blame the Jews. I mean, it's worked pretty well for 1,500 years or so, and we might just try to get one last bang out of this particular thing. So clearly there is that thing, right? But it's still in the future. The biggest danger is anti-Semitism, right? Which I'm calling, and I'll soon do something on this concept, I'm calling the Zionist Inquisition. It's this idea that it's the only kind of ideological cement left in the West. It's paying your due respect to the Zionist entity for some weird reason. And just as the Spanish Inquisition, it's actually very weak. It wants to be this totalitarian monster that you can't think or pray or do anything before they come on you and throw you in the water to see if you're impure or not. And of course, if you float, it's the proof that your mind is full of devilish thoughts. And if you sink, it proves that you were innocent. And with this International Holocaust Remembrance Association working definition, and especially those crazy examples, you are in this kind of situation, literally anything, everything, and nothing you say can be seen as anti-Semitic. Like if you say if in France you say Epstein, which is the way I've learned to pronounce it all my life, because it's more like kind of the German way and even the Yiddish way, it's the way you do it. But if now in France or in Britain, like Corbyn did, or in France this guy Mélenchon did, you say Epstein, then it's a proof of your anti-Semitism, right? If you say Epstein, but you say it kind of too slow and you go, or maybe you smirk a little bit as you say Steen, then it's, so you see, there is this thing, and the ideology is anti-Semitism, and it helps to reconfigure the racial regime, the racial contract, the contours of whiteness with this legislations. And in Florida, you probably have it. Even the dog catcher needs to be a Zionist, right?
That definition by that Holocaust institution is law. It was passed in the state of Florida as law. I think you're absolutely right, and I think that because Zionists have so embedded themselves into Jewishness that it fighting against it. I see this debate online right now. It's like, oh, you shouldn't say Zog, right? And for me, I don't say it just because it's almost like cringe. It's like people just said it too much.
It's just dumb.
Like, it's just dumb. It's like saying retard. It's like Elon Musk ruined it. Like it has no power anymore. People saying goy slop and all this stuff. And I'm watching them ruin it the same way that they ruined 9/11, for instance, by making it a joke. The internet just, even Charlie Kirk's death, you know, I think when the internet, when it goes critical mass on the internet, it renders it politically useless anymore. And so I think you're absolutely right that it's like, I don't care. Like as a Jew in America, I have never been threatened in my entire life. It's never been, even my father, but the worst thing that ever happened to my father was in high school when his history professor, who I think was Xiang's professor as well, said that the Jews killed Jesus or something like that. Like that was like the worst thing that he heard, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know he did that." So it's not.
Yeah, but real. if you tell me the French killed whoever, I'll go, okay, fine.
Yeah,
whatever. The French have done such, they've invented the gas chambers in Algeria, right? So
yeah. Well, I would say to Christians, you're welcome. Like that. Well, what would you have done without us? Like you wouldn't have your guy. So what's the big deal? But I guess what pisses me off about what I see about the Zog thing going on is, like, I see this. There's that one guy, you know, the Palestine News Network guy who goes up with his camera and harasses people and says, say free Palestine, say free Palestine. But what he does now too is he says, is it America first or Israel first? It's like, fuck America first. Are you kidding? Why would you even say? I hate that shit. And so what I'm seeing these people do is hedge their bets, right? They're absolving the United States in the future by saying, oh, it's not our fault. We didn't want to do this. We're just tricked by eugenius Jews who have controlled the world for thousands of years, apparently. That nothing everything wrong with Western civilization is because of Jews.
That's plan B. That's plan B, right? But on another level, that some people, especially Palestinians, tactically would want to do that. My duty is to shut the F up. I'll just say, my grandfather was a member of the armed resistance against the Nazis, and he also was a Germanophile. He actually, in 1942, came first in France in the top national education exam for German teachers, right? He loved German culture like nobody else, ever. And he joined the anti-Nazi resistance, armed resistance. And, we had slogans like, to each French person, their Boche, which was the most demeaning word to designate the Germans at the time. And that was a stupid, racist, chauvinist slogan that didn't, pay due respect to what German culture had brought to the world. But you think my grandfather spent a single second of the anti-Nazi fight going around saying, you shouldn't use those terms because really it's not, you can't tar all people with this, and it's not the people, it's the ruling class, it's this and that. Of course not. He took his gun and he fought until it was over. And then he continued being a German teacher. Do you know what I'm saying? So at this level, people who come and say, we shouldn't be anti-Semitic, we shouldn't use those slogans. If you don't like those slogans, don't use them. But don't spend your energy trying to stop people using them. Go to your synagogues, take the effing genocidal flags down, call them out for their genocidal, whatever you call the equivalent to sermons in synagogues. Do that if you want to save whatever you think is Jewish identity that can be saved. Don't police the people who are fighting it. Don't police their speech. So that's my line on this particular point.
Absolutely. And I think that's what Jews around the world need to do who oppose Zionism in all its forms, is you need to piss off your aunt and uncle or something. I don't know. We had
if you want to still call yourself Jewish, you can also go fuck that. Look, my family comes from a Catholic line. I never think of myself as Catholic. Like, I don't give a flying whatever burrito. Catholic means nothing to me. So if you said tomorrow, the Vatican's gone under Karamsha and Catholicism is over, I'd go,
yeah, cool.
whatever.
Yeah,
no, not even cool. Not even cool. I go, whatever. Oh, fewer pedophiles in the world. That's cool. But it's not even the religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I don't think that there's anything. It doesn't have to last forever. It's okay if it goes away. Like
nothing lasts forever.
Yeah,
this too shall pass.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right, and I think that it is important not to, like, first of all, don't get offended. I think my tactic is to say you're Jewish too. Like you're a Jew in this world, in this modern world. You're a Jew as well. So we should all be
mystical Jews.
Well, I mean, we're all Jews in Marx's Jewish question sense of the Jews. We are all capitalist swine who are feeding the empire. So you're a Jew too.
Now there you are retailing tropes. Now you've become a real self-hating, probably.
Is there any other kind?
Yeah, and you see, the mind games are endless. Like, and this is why I call it the Zionist Inquisition, because if you float, you're an anti-Semite, and if you sink, well, too bad. We barely knew you.
All right, Benji, this was a ton of fun.
It was.
If anybody likes this, go check out Benji on Twitter. I'll put all the links in the bio stuff, and subscribe to his Resistance is Fertile on Substack.
Can I say one last thing? I know.
Yeah.
So I think you sent me a DM asking how do I join the shitposting brigades of the free people of the world, and I absolutely love that. So if you are one of the free people of the world, you know it in your heart, and it's a general psychological war. Everything we say, everything we do, all content, especially online, is ammunition in that psychological war. So you can take your gun, take your keyboard, and think every time you put something out, is this nourishing the spirit of resistance? Does it make me feel, and others potentially, that resistance is fertile? Or does it actually extinguish it? Makes me feel, or others, that resistance is futile? Once you get those two things, then you're ready to join the self-identified shitposting brigades of the free people of the world. And I'm a member of Unit 2027 and not 8,100, because the founder of the Palestinian Islamic Resistance Movement, Sheikh Yassin, said that entity would be gone by 2027.
Salute.
Salute.